Before we go any further, take a slow, gentle breath and ask yourself a question most men never dare to voice after 60. When was the last time you touched your own body with the same patience and kindness you once reserved for a sweetheart? If that question makes your cheeks warm or your heart pound a little faster, stay with me. Tonight we are going to talk openly, perhaps for the first time in your life, about self-pleasure, and why the men who quietly master it in their later years so often enjoy better sleep, stronger intimacy, and a surprising boost of youthful energy. This isn't a gimmick or a fad. It's the simple, science-backed reality that your body, even at 70 or 80, still responds to mindful touch. And if you've been told otherwise, I'm here to set the record straight. I remember the evening George, a retired railway engineer, shuffled into my office. At 68 he felt embarrassed, his broad shoulders slumped like a boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. George whispered that his drive had faded, erections were shy, and he feared that exploring himself was sinful or pointless at his age. His wife had passed 3 years earlier, and loneliness was gnawing holes in his confidence. Yet underneath the shame I heard hope that his body still held a spark. George's story might sound familiar, because countless men have asked me the very same questions over my career. My name is Dr. Nolan Easton, and for more than 30 years I have devoted my urology practice to guiding men through every stage of life, from their first teenage concerns to the quiet battles of the golden years. I've performed surgeries, delivered difficult diagnoses, and celebrated triumphant recoveries. But the conversations that move me most are the hushed ones. When a gentleman like George leans in, lowers his voice, and asks, "Doctor, is it really okay for me to pleasure myself?" The short answer is yes. The longer answer, the one we will explore together tonight, could change how you feel in your own skin. Let's begin with what you stand to gain. Gentle, regular self-stimulation encourages fresh, oxygen-rich blood to flow into the small vessels that feed the penis and prostate. Think of it as watering a favorite houseplant. Without moisture, the stems droop, but a light sprinkle revives the bloom. That circulation delivers nutrients that keep erectile tissue supple and nerves responsive. It also coaxes your brain to release endorphins, nature's own painkillers and mood elevators, softening anxiety and brightening your outlook on the day ahead. My patients often tell me they sleep more deeply on nights they take this time for themselves. Physically, the practice strengthens the same pelvic floor muscles you work during prescribed Kegel exercises. Each gentle contraction supports bladder control and can make those midnight trips to the bathroom less urgent. Hormonal balance benefits as well. While testosterone gradually declines with age, short periods of sexual arousal appear to stimulate transient upticks that translate to better energy and clearer concentration the following morning. Perhaps most overlooked, mindful self-touch rewires the brain's map of pleasurable sensation, reminding aging nerve pathways that they are still alive and still important. When George returned after 2 weeks of simple homework, 10 conscious minutes with warm lubricant, soft music, and no goal except curiosity, he walked taller. He reported firmer morning erections, but what thrilled him more was a renewed confidence that spread into daily life. He accepted lunch invitations, laughed louder with his grandchildren, even started painting again. This is why I share what some call taboo. If you're finding value already, tap that thumbs up button, subscribe, and ring the little bell so you never miss our heart-to-heart chats. And tell me in the comments with a simple yes or no, does talking openly about self-pleasure feel helpful? I personally read your answers to shape future advice. Another benefit rarely mentioned in polite company is prostate relief. Gentle ejaculation flushes seminal fluid, lowering the risk of congestion that can lead to discomfort or inflammation. Think of draining a garden hose before winter. The flow prevents stagnant buildup. Regular release may also reduce perceived pain in men with chronic pelvic ache. For those worried about elevated prostate-specific antigen, studies suggest normal sexual activity, including self-pleasure, does not raise long-term cancer risk. In fact, maintaining healthy function could support early detection by keeping baselines steady. Yet self-pleasure is not merely mechanical. It's a private dialogue between body and mind, an exercise in self-compassion that our generation was seldom encouraged to practice. When you set aside guilt, you grant yourself permission to feel deserving of comfort. That sense of worthiness spills into partnership too. Widowers who later find love tell me they approach new intimacy with calm assurance, because they have already relearned their own rhythms. Married men discover they communicate desires more clearly, enriching mutual moments with their spouses. George and I ended that first appointment with a handshake that lasted a heartbeat longer than usual. He thanked me for giving him permission, a word no doctor should have to dispense, yet one I'm honored to offer. You do not need permission to explore the remarkable body that has carried you through decades of work, play, triumph, and loss. You need only curiosity and kindness. As we continue our conversation, remember George's tentative first steps toward rediscovering pleasure, and the new dawn he woke up to just days later. By the time George felt that fresh sunrise stirring inside him, another gentleman, Victor, was setting a very different appointment on my calendar. Victor is 73, a retired naval officer whose posture still suggests morning inspections and polished brass. He marched into my clinic with charts he had printed from the internet, each one highlighting a supposed danger of excessive self-pleasure. His voice carried the rumble of battleships. "Dr. Easton, I'm afraid I've damaged something. I've enjoyed my own company most evenings since my wife died, but these articles say my prostate will swell, my testosterone will vanish, and I'll end up lonely and bitter." Victor needed facts, not folklore, and perhaps you do too. So let's clear the fog. First, there is no credible evidence that mindful, moderate self-stimulation harms the prostate or lowers testosterone long-term. In truth, a landmark study that followed nearly 32,000 men for almost 2 decades found that regular ejaculation, through intercourse or solo practice, was linked to a reduced risk of prostate cancer. What matters is balance and intention, not austerity. The prostate, like any gland, prefers gentle exercise over enforced idleness. Victor listened, arms crossed. I could see distrust wrestling with curiosity in his eyes. I invited him to breathe out, uncross his elbows, and feel his ribcage expand, a small gesture reminding him that every inch of his torso is alive and worth acknowledging. Together we spoke about the mechanics he feared. During climax, rhythmic contractions draw fresh blood into the pelvic basin, then help flush old secretions away. Imagine rinsing a teapot. You pour warm water through, swirl lightly, and what's left is cleaner, fresher, ready for the next steep. Far from wearing out the pelvic muscles, these contractions tone them, much like gentle Tai Chi strengthens joints through fluid motion. Yet the concern about excess is not unfounded. Habit can slide into compulsion if self-pleasure becomes an escape from every uncomfortable emotion, loneliness, grief, boredom. I told Victor what I'll tell you. The goal is mindful connection, not numb distraction. A useful signpost is duration and flexibility. If you can choose to wait without distress, if you still enjoy other activities, conversations, outdoor walks, then your practice is healthy. Should you ever feel trapped in a cycle of discomfort and urgent relief, that's the moment to seek guidance, and yes, I'm here for that conversation too. Victor nodded, softer now, as we discussed preparation. I recommend setting an intentional space, not just locking the door, but adjusting the lights, selecting music that calms or uplifts, and keeping a water-based lubricant nearby. Dry friction is the enemy of sensitive, mature skin. Lubricant reduces micro-tears that may otherwise invite irritation or infection. I often compare this to polishing an antique wooden desk. You would never scrub its surface with sandpaper. You would apply a gentle oil, move with the grain, honor the years etched into that timber. After technique comes pacing. Many men race toward climax, memories of youthful urgency guiding their hands. But a slower tempo invites the body's chemistry to unfold fully. Dopamine sparks anticipation, oxytocin grows at the edges of pleasure, and by lingering there you coax a richer release of nitric oxide, which relaxes blood vessel walls and fosters those coveted firm erections later on. Patients who adopt this unhurried rhythm report fewer instances of finishing too fast with partners because they've trained their nervous system to savor, not sprint. At this point you might wonder, how often is enough? There is no magic frequency, but I suggest listening to your body the way you listen for thirst. Some nights you'll crave the intimacy. Other weeks life's busyness will draw your attention elsewhere. A gentle rule of thumb many of my patients enjoy is 2 or 3 times per week, each session lasting at least 10 minutes. That gives tissues time to replenish and maintains pelvic tone without edging into compulsion. Remember, these aren't quotas. They're guideposts, adjusted to fit your energy and schedule. Before Victor left, he shared a secret fear. "Doctor, What if memories of my late wife make me sad while I'm alone? It's a tender question, and grief often rises in quiet moments. I invited him to turn sorrow into gratitude, to hold her image, thank her for years of companionship. Then invite that warmth into his own embrace. Many widowers find that honoring love in this way transforms tears into a soft smile that accompanies sensation rather than eclipsing it. Self-pleasure becomes a conversation with memory, a bridge between past affection and present vitality. Speaking of conversation, this is a perfect moment to let your voice be heard. If you find Victor's concerns mirror your own, tap the like button and subscribe so you never miss our candid chats. And in the comments, simply answer, yes, or no. Does reframing self-pleasure as mindful self-care ease your worries? I read every response and weave your feedback into future advice. A week later Victor returned, no spreadsheets in hand, only a small grin that betrayed relief. He had followed the slow, intentional approach, taking breaks to breathe deeply when anxiety surfaced. The result? Not only were his erections steadier, but his mood lifted during the day. And a chronic ache in his lower back felt diminished, a benefit he attributed to relaxed pelvic muscles. The military man who once feared he was broken, now stood straighter, his salute replaced by quiet confidence. Stories like Victor's remind us that information heals as surely as medicine. When myth is dispelled and judgment dissolved, the body responds with vigor. And when you treat your own touch as a gift rather than a guilty secret, that gift ripples outward, into posture, into conversation, even into the courage to join a community-centered dance or volunteer project. I've watched it happen too many times to doubt. If tonight's discussion stirred new thoughts, sit with them gently. Maybe brew a cup of chamomile, run a warm bath, and let your hands explore the sensation of water on skin. Begin to see yourself not as an aging machine needing repairs, but as a living landscape deserving regular rainfall and sunlight. We're only halfway through our journey together, and already seeds are sprouting in places once thought barren. So, before you retire for the evening, place a hand over your heart, feel the steady beat, and remember, this body has never stopped working for you. Offer it softness in return, and it will answer with strength. If you closed your eyes last night and let the hushed warmth of your own hands meet the steady rhythm beneath your breastbone, you might have woken up feeling something subtle yet profound. Like fresh rain scent lingering in the garden after dawn. That gentle stirring is your nervous system whispering, I remember. It remembers teenage thrills, the flush of first love, but also the quiet devotion you learned later. Repairing toys for grandchildren, tending roses, setting out tea for a spouse who now sleeps in softer twilight. Self-pleasure is simply another expression of that devotion, directed inward. And speaking of devotion, allow me to introduce Samuel. Samuel is 71, a semi-retired math teacher whose life has always been measured in careful equations. Mortgage paid plus pension equals security. Steps walked minus calories eaten equals health. But a month ago he noticed a variable he had never calculated, pleasure. After knee surgery left him housebound, he began exploring meditation apps to manage pain, and one guided body scan exercise invited him to notice sensation at his fingertips, his belly, and, yes, his groin. He realized the last time he'd touched himself without urgency was decades ago, and that thought landed like an unfinished sum on the blackboard of his mind. Was it too late to solve? Samuel arrived at my clinic with a notebook of questions. Could mindful self-touch help the dull aches radiating from his surgical scar? Would it raise heart rate dangerously or interfere with anticoagulants? Most of all, he worried it might feel childish. I smiled because curiosity is never childish, it's the purest adult courage I know. We spoke about the cascade of neurochemicals released by arousal, dopamine to motivate, oxytocin to soothe, and endogenous opioids that ease discomfort far gentler than any pill bottle on his nightstand. None of these conflict with his medications. In fact, moderate increases in heart rate can stimulate circulation and assist recovery, like gentle physiotherapy for vessels. To put theory into practice, I suggested a simple routine. Begin with diaphragmatic breathing, inhaling through the nose for 4 counts, exhaling for 6. This lengthened exhale activates the vagus nerve, lowering blood pressure and inviting relaxation. Only when Samuel felt grounded was he to explore touch, starting not below the waist but on the forearms, shoulders, chest. Why? Because aging skin anywhere on the body sends sensory signals to the same pleasure centers. Waking those pathways first primes the brain so that when genital contact finally arrives, sensation feels fuller, richer, and less rushed. It is, in mathematical terms, expanding the data set before drawing conclusions. I see you nodding. Perhaps you have your own questions about safety. Let's pause for a housekeeping tip. Keep tissues or a damp, warm washcloth within reach. Semen consistency changes with age, sometimes thicker, and gentle cleanup prevents skin irritation. Use non-scented soap afterward, pat dry rather than rub, and consider a light, fragrance-free moisturizer because sebaceous glands thin with time. Think of it as shining the brass fittings on that naval vessel Victor once captained. Routine maintenance keeps beauty intact. Now here's where the narrative circles back to you. Have you felt hesitant to begin? If this conversation is turning apprehension into motivation, tap that thumbs up button and subscribe so these intimate talks reach you without effort. And leave a simple yes or no in the comments. Does knowing Samuel's breathing technique sound doable? I promise Dr. Easton, yours truly, reads every answer after clinic hours, refining guidance to meet your real-world needs. 3 weeks later, Samuel entered my office with an energy I wish I could bottle for every patient. He reported that after combining breathwork with slow exploration, he found a rhythm that gently pulsed away post-operative stiffness. His nightly pain scale dropped from a 7 to a 3 without increasing medication. More surprising to him, morning stiffness in his hands, a mild osteoarthritis, also eased. That's because oxytocin and nitric oxide don't localize. They circulate, relaxing smooth muscle and easing inflammation system-wide. He described drifting to sleep afterward with a soft hum in his chest, like a classroom after the final bell, quiet but content. Equally important, Samuel confronted the emotional equation of shame minus understanding. He discovered that treating self-pleasure as mindful therapy reframed it from secret mischief to self-care, allowing him to journal about sensations the way he once graphed sine waves, noting peaks, troughs, and sweet plateaus. His notebook, once filled with anxieties, now held gratitude lists. Better sleep, calmer mood, the confidence to attend his granddaughter's violin recital without fearing a sudden flare of knee pain. The tale would be incomplete without addressing spiritual concerns many of you have raised in previous comments. Does faith forbid this practice? After decades of listening, I've learned spirituality and sexuality need not clash. Both celebrate the miracle of being alive. One pastor patient likened mindful self-touch to saying grace over a meal, acknowledging the body's nourishment as a gift. If your tradition offers guidelines, honor them. But remember, most wisdom texts speak against lust that harms others, not gentle curiosity that heals oneself. Technical interlude over. Let's touch on sensation adaptation. Nerve endings may become less sensitive with age, just as hearing fades, yet you can heighten response through contrast. Warm the room to a comfortable temperature, then apply a slightly cooler lubricant or alternate strokes with a silk cloth. The brain loves variety. Novel textures rekindle dormant neural circuits. You might even experiment with subtle pelvic floor contractions during exhale. Think of drawing the scrotum upward 3 seconds, relaxing for 6. This micro exercise invites fresh blood and strengthens sphincter control. Samuel laughed when I suggested a silk scarf, calling it a far cry from chalk dust and rulers, but he tried it. The added texture turned exploration into creative play, and creativity, my dear friends, is neuroprotective. Studies show novel sensory input fosters dendritic growth, tiny tree-like extensions of neurons, supporting memory and learning at any age. So when you indulge in new sensations, you're not just stoking embers below the belt, you're pruning and grafting the orchard in your mind. Perhaps you still feel uncertain. Remember George, whose shoulders lifted after rediscovering pleasure, and Victor, who traded fear for confidence. Samuel now joins their ranks. Each man took a different route, warm lubricant under soft light, slow breath counting, playful textures, yet all arrived at the same clearing. A place where their own touch renewed the simple joy of inhabiting a living body. Before we part this evening, rest your palms together as if in prayer, finger pads sensing finger pads, warmth meeting warmth. Feel that? It is proof your nervous system still speaks volumes. If you choose, later tonight, to let that conversation travel further, do so with gentleness and gratitude. And should any doubts whisper, recall Samuel's equation. Breath plus curiosity plus kindness equals relief. It balances every time. Perhaps last night you paused before turning out the bedside lamp, recalling Samuel's soft hum or Victor's relieved grin, and wondered what your own closing chapter might feel like. Let me assure you, the story of self-pleasure in later life does not end with a period but with an open door, creaking wide to let in fresh air and future possibilities. I have one more gentleman to introduce, though if you listen closely, you may hear echoes of your own heartbeat in his tale. Elias is 81, a retired jazz pianist whose fingers once danced across ivory keys with effortless swing. Arthritis stiffened those knuckles over time, and he feared the same rigidity had crept into his intimate life. When he shuffled into my office, hat in hand, he spoke in half notes and pauses. "Doc, the music feels like it's fading. I want to feel improvisational again." His eyes sparkled with mischief despite the tremor in his hands. And I knew the spark was there, only buried beneath layers of caution. Elias had watched our earlier conversations online. Yes, he is one of you tapping thumbs ups in the quiet glow of midnight, and he came armed not with worry but with desire. The desire to translate everything he loved about jazz into the language of touch. So we borrowed from his craft. I asked him to imagine each evening as a slow blues progression. The introduction. Setting the room's ambience, dimming lights like lowering stage lamps. The bridge. Brushing fingertips over his forearms, letting nerve endings warm as reeds in a brass section. And then the solo, where improvisation reigns, tempo rises and falls, pauses become as meaningful as strokes. We even used jazz metaphors for breathing. Inhale on the downbeat, exhale on the up, letting each phrase linger before resolving into silence. Elias also faced a pragmatic hurdle. The stiffness in his hands made traditional grip uncomfortable. So we adapted, employing a soft silicone sleeve warmed under tap water, allowing him to slide his palms in slower, broader movements rather than tight pressure. Adaptation is not defeat. It is creativity, the same creativity that once turned a simple C7 chord into an evening of joy for audiences. 2 weeks later he returned, hat tipped at a jaunty angle, declaring, "Dr. Easton, the band's back together." He played me a recording of his practice session, not at the piano, but in life, describing how each tactile note built a crescendo that left him not winded but weightless, as though floating above the city skyline after a late-night gig. Why share Elias's encore? Because he embodies the final principle I want to leave with you. Pleasure is a living art, evolving alongside our bodies. Age may revise technique, but it never cancels the performance. And when you approach self-pleasure with the spirit of a musician, listening, adjusting, savoring surprise, you cultivate resilience far beyond the bedroom. Elias reported that after resuming his nightly jam sessions, his hand mobility improved, swelling subsided, and he found courage to accept an invitation to mentor young musicians again. The echo of solitary delight became a chorus of community. If Elias's story strikes a chord, this is your gentle reminder to click like, subscribe, and tap the bell so our future chats arrive like familiar melodies on a Sunday morning. And, as always, answer in the comments with a simple yes or no. Have these conversations helped you feel more in tune with your body? I read each reply between clinic rounds, adjusting my advice the way Elias tunes his piano before a set. Before we close the curtain, let's address one lingering myth: that self-pleasure diminishes partnered intimacy. In my 30-plus years of zooming through lab results and listening to whispered confessions, I have witnessed the opposite. Men who know their own rhythms bring richer awareness to shared moments, just as seasoned musicians improvise gracefully because they first mastered scales alone. When George eventually began dating a fellow widower he met at watercolor class, he described their first embrace as returning to a melody my fingers already knew. Victor, too, reported deeper conversation with his adult children, no longer weighed by silent worry. Samuel's nightly breathing practice became a ritual his wife joined, resting a hand over his heart while he guided them both through slow exhalations. And Elias? Well, he hasn't remarried, but the twinkle in his eye when he speaks of late-night jam sessions at the community center tells me the music of connection plays on. Now, a practical parting gift. When you next retire to your private sanctuary, experiment with pacing your breath to a gentle 4-4 count. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, rest for 4, mirroring the steady beat of a drummer's brush on snare. Notice how suspense builds in the rests, Anticipation is its own flavor of delight. Use lubricant warmed in your palms or, if grip feels weak, a textured scarf drawn lightly across the thighs. Vary the tempo, pause when sensation peaks, then resume at half speed. This dance of acceleration and decrescendo mirrors the natural sine wave of arousal and keeps pelvic floor muscles elastic, preventing the plateau some men mistake for decline. And if at any point discomfort or apprehension creeps in, pause as a saxophonist would, letting silence gather. Ask your body what it needs. A sip of water, a shift in position, perhaps simply reassurance that taking time for oneself is neither selfish nor shameful. That dialogue, body asking, mind answering, is the session's true finale, paving the way for calm sleep and lighter steps come sunrise. We have journeyed together through shame's shadows into rooms lit by curiosity. You met George, who learned permission is a right, Victor, who traded myth for measured pace, Samuel, who breathed mathematics into sensation, and Elias, whose arthritic hands rediscovered improvisation. Their stories are stepping stones laid out for you, but your footfalls will compose a path unique to your years. If doubt lingers, remember the evidence: improved circulation, steadier hormones, calmer nerves, brighter mood, and that gentle smile curling at the edge of memory whenever you give yourself this care. So here is my final prescription, written not on paper but in the pulse you feel when two fingers rest upon your wrist. Once this video ends, close your device, find a quiet space, and gift yourself 10 unhurried minutes of presence. No expectation, no grade, just exploration. Whether your hands discover a brisk waltz or a languid lullaby, know that every sensation is a note in the grand symphony of a life still being composed. Thank you for trusting me, Dr. Nolan Easton, with these intimate minutes. May your evenings echo with music, your mornings greet you with rested vigor, and may you always remember that pleasure has no expiration date, only new arrangements waiting to be played. Until our next heartfelt conversation, keep breathing, keep listening, and keep that door of curiosity wide open.